Welcome to Hope in the Halls, Christian Voices from Washington, D.C., sponsored by Hope to the Hill, also sponsored by Can We Pray, with your hosts Nathan and Amber Kistler. Learn more about Hope to the Hill at www.hopetothehill.com.
Welcome back, Amber.
Welcome back.
It's exciting.
If y'all only knew how many times we have tried to record this episode with our dogs in the background, this is probably episode trial number 15 because one wants to drink water, one wants to go outside, one wants to have treats, and then they want to fight each other. And so we have had to start this episode over at least 15 times. So we're finally here, and welcome back, everyone.
Welcome.
We're going to try to get through this with as little dog noises as possible.
That's right. Well, we've had because we've been traveling so much.
Oh, a lot.
We also, our soon-to-be guests are also traveling a lot.
Yep, but they're coming. They're coming on the podcast. Yeah. We're so excited about that.
We are. And 3 of them have been they're actually in Mexico City right now. Yep. And on the world or the international press tour for Sound of Freedom. And we talked to Tim and one of the security guys, I guess it was yesterday. Yeah. And they're having a good time while they're there too. So they're enjoying their time. But I want to go back to the very beginning, pretty much of my time in D.C., and we're going to lead into 2 other stories. But this one was just before Amber and I.
Well, and we had a question that came in about of if we ever have come in contact with some of the Supreme Court. And so that's kind of what led into this episode of how we have interacted with the court some, even though we don't specifically, that's not really where we are kind of focused. Mm-hmm. We do come in contact with them. And so that's why we wanted to tell this story.
Yeah. And my first, maybe 6 years or so in D.C. working was with a ministry that specifically ministered to the Supreme Court.
Right.
And so, yes, especially back then, had a lot of interactions with the justices throughout the years. Justice Thomas used to live down the street from the court, just around the corner. And so every morning he would walk to the office. This was pre all the craziness that we find ourselves in.
Can you imagine nowadays a justice just walking down the road to the office? That doesn't happen now.
No.
I don't think it ever will again.
I don't think so either. And crazy enough, this was less than 10 years ago. I mean, think about it.
Yeah, it's hard to believe.
Less than 10 years ago.
Pre-pandemic.
Pre-pandemic and
pre-craziness.
All of the craziness that has happened. But I remember on most days when I would be at the office, I would see Justice Thomas walking down the street, and we would talk. Sometimes we would walk to the court together.
And he's a great man.
He's a sweet man, and had a lot of interaction with Justice Scalia and his family back then. But I remember just after, obviously, Scalia passed away, and Justice Gorsuch was sworn in, had his investiture ceremony, and then right after that, we have another justice that has to be chosen. And, the first one, I think the other side was okay with allowing it. They were replacing a conservative justice at that point. But when it came to someone that was a champion of the left, it wasn't going to go down so easy at that point. And I get their frustration at that point in time. But I remember the night that President Trump at that time said, I'm going to be announcing the person who's I'm nominating to be confirmed as a Supreme Court justice, which we found out was none other than Justice Kavanaugh. That's right. And it was amazing. Every new justice since my time in D.C., we would go out and make the first the first public prayer in front of the court to pray, not specifically maybe, we would pray for them and their families, but for the process they were about to go through. It's a tough process.
Yeah, I mean, and their whole life is about to change. I mean, you got to think.
Turned upside down.
It's
completely
turned upside down.
Yeah. Everything that they've ever done in their entire life is scrutinized. Everything from their childhood on. And we experienced that with Justice Kavanaugh. So I remember we walk out there, there's 6 of us, and about 300 protesters already outside in front of the court. And it was a little overwhelming at that point because I had never experienced anything like that in D.C.
I definitely think he probably had the most amount of protesters in my lifetime that I had ever seen for a justice.
Yes. And we shared a little bit about what happened in the room after
Right.
that every week for the entire time his confirmation hearings were happening. But we stepped outside and people already had signs with his name on them before President Trump. I mean, it was between three people at that point, but I think people assumed who it was going to be. They had signs ready to go that had, all these little sayings on them about Kavanaugh. And it was very overwhelming. And so we began to walk out there, and we're trying to figure out what are we going to say? How are we going to start praying? There's media out there. And so we stepped out, began to pray, and people were screaming. I've never, you got to think, it's impossible sometimes for us to multitask whenever there's something happening, just a small thing, off to the side. But think about the fact when you're trying to pray out loud and there's 300 people screaming at you. And I'll never forget that. It was my turn to pray, and it was so overwhelming. The crowd was so loud that one of the other ministers that was with us, he yelled down to me at the end. I was on the very last person on the right side. And he said, Nathan, I need you to sing something. And I was like, no, I'm not singing anything out here. He said, no. He said, you need to sing something. Sing the Lord's Prayer. I said, I really didn't want to at all. But he said, please. And has nothing to do with my voice or anything like that. But I remember as I began to sing the Lord's Prayer, the crowd got quieter and quieter until you could hear a pin drop outside in front of the Supreme Court. And again, it had nothing to do with me or my voice. I believe it was two things. It's the words of Jesus Christ, the Lord's Prayer, as simple as it is, but also it was music. And it taught me something at that point about the transcending nature of, one, a prayer, because it is the Lord's Prayer. And when it's put to music, that's the second part of that is so transcending. Prayer and music, we have found, is such a transcending thing in Washington and anywhere you go. And as soon as I finished singing that song, singing that prayer, people began to scream again. And we finished praying. And as we were praying, there was a lady, and it's on C-SPAN somewhere. I need to find the video. There was a lady that had her dog, and the dog was literally almost in my face, barking at me, freaking out. And I thought, this dog's about to eat my face off. my eyes closed, and I'm not even going to see it coming. And when we got up, we finished praying, we started walking through the crowd, and people spat on us and tried to trip us as we were leaving that space. And it was the first time in my life that I had ever experienced, I wouldn't even call it persecution. It's not persecution. But I had ever experienced somebody have so much hatred and they didn't even know me.
Yeah, just a lot of evil.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so that's one of the stories that have stood out in my mind in the midst of all of that hatred and the vitriol and all the things that are happening in that moment. God used a song, music, and a prayer to quiet that crowd to a whisper. And it really, I think, initiated something for us when you and I got married. A lot of the things that we do in DC, the outreach and things like that, it has something to do. Our ministry is about praying with people. We've brought musicians in, the sound, we just talked with them. There's a reason why we bring people like that in, because music transcends the politics and the policy issues and all of that.
It gets their attention too. It's something outside the norm of what those office buildings look like every single day. I mean, it's just so black and white everywhere that you look. And then when you have people like an artist like The Sound come in, or if you have, us singing the Lord's Prayer in the Rotunda, there's just something that's different about that. And obviously it's the light of Jesus that is different. and there's no darkness that surrounds that. It's just beauty, and it's the Holy Ghost that comes in, and just the Holy Spirit just, I don't know, it warms the hearts of the people, whether they believe or not.
Yeah.
And I truly, I've come to know that ever since that we've been in DC, since I've been there. I've watched it happen so many times where we've been in the rotunda and we've sang hymns or we've sang the Lord's Prayer, and people that are just walking by just stop and listen. And I don't know what they leave with after that, but I hope that they leave with something. Maybe it's some kind of hope, or maybe they go searching for that hope. And that's kind of what we're there for, obviously, is to bring hope.
Yeah. And I hate to be that guy, but you and I are both kind of nerds when it comes to things, movies and things like that. But I remember there's this specific scene from Harry Potter that we've watched, and we're Harry Potter nerds. And if you don't like Harry Potter, I'm sorry, but we both are Harry Potter nerds, Star Wars nerds first, but Harry Potter. But there's a specific scene where, all the guys, they're coming down towards Harry, and he shines this light out of his wand, and it pushes all of the darkness back. And every time when we're in DC, just like you said, when you're singing a song like that or whatever, that's, in my mind, it's kind of the mental image, because there's a spiritual war that is going on for the hearts and the minds of people. And so, as Bill Gaither says, again, the darker the night, the brighter the light. Just a little bit of light, whether it's a song, a prayer, whatever, it pushes back the forces of darkness in a way that we don't understand. I think that we'll never understand. Only God knows. But those have been some of the most beautiful moments of strange times that God has worked in the midst of. Now, that was before you and I started dating, before we got married, but we got engaged. And I took you, I remember, to an event at the court where some of the justices were at.
And I do have to say, speaking of Bill and Gloria, I use them quite a lot in DC, because I am not that well known. And, but if I can mention their name, they have reached so many people that I believe they probably will never know about. But they have reached such a vast majority of people. I mean, especially in DC, Democrats and Republicans that they have ministered to.
Yeah.
And they have just been the greatest examples of that. And we have always used them and said that we sing with them and that we know them, and we sing their songs to a lot of members on both sides of the aisle that love them. And this story in particular was one where I was shocked.
Yeah, I
was shocked.
Well, and it had never really been one of those things that came up in my normal conversation with this specific justice, or really any of the justices at all at that point, because you and I, I had been out of the music world for some time. I had been in DC. That was just what I did. And so there was really never any need. I didn't really tell people that I sang, but whenever you and I, were about to get married, I'm your biggest hype guy. So I told everybody, my wife is an amazing singer, whatever. I always tell people that. And I love that. I love to share your name and your wonderful voice everywhere. But we went to this event, this dinner one night, and I was excited to introduce you. I was taking you into my world a little bit. And
it's a really private thing. It's not, because I know we make it sound like the justices were just out and about.
No, they weren't.
It was very exclusive. It's mainly for, what you say, like lawyers and attorneys, and then it's kind of invite only. And you had an invitation, and you were able to bring a +1.
Yeah.
And I'm always now going to be that +1.
That's right. Yeah. You've been my +1 to a lot of wonderful things, and
It's
I've
been
your
amazing.
+1 to a lot of wonderful
That's right.
things. So, we get into the room, or at least into this side room where I remember the Chief Justice was there, and we went up. I introduced you to him, to Justice Thomas, and some of the others. But I took you up to a justice that would be categorized as being probably one of the most liberal justices on the Supreme Court, that people typically look at as being the absolute antithesis of anything that is good.
Right.
And that's typically the way people have seen her. And even I have been guilty of that. often in my life. But I remember I was going to take you up to meet her, and she said, hello, Nathan, who is this? I said, this is my fiance. We just got engaged. She said, oh, well, what law firm is she with? Because pretty much everybody there, it's an anomaly for someone who's not a lawyer to be at this thing. And I said, well, she's not a lawyer, actually. She sings for a living. She said, really? She said, what kind of music? I said, gospel music. And she said, oh, do you know the Gaithers? I love the Gaithers. And I said, absolutely, I know the Gaithers. They're like my grandparents. And so there was this moment for me that was just astounding to see a justice. And I mean, obviously, she's a justice at the Supreme Court, but to see her almost come down to the same level as me to be human was amazing to see, because we probably politically don't have anything in common, but we found something in common that we both did love. And we talked for probably 15 minutes about music and her favorite songs. She talked about her favorite Gaither video. And that was just something that you could just tell she was just, it lit the room for her. Yeah. And it was something other than politics, which is what I'm sure she's used to talking about all the time. If it's not politics, it's probably a Supreme Court case that she's having to deal with. Most of the time, their lives are probably just filled with stress. And here was this moment of something that brought joy to her that we could connect on, and she could just talk, and it was just probably a freeing feeling. It had to be a freeing feeling. Yeah, I'm sure it's probably one of the first times in many years that anybody had said anything about her childhood, because she said, I grew up listening to the Gaithers, because she's a younger justice of the the 7 or the 9, sorry, I don't know what I'm saying, and so it was just interesting to have that perspective, and we were so excited. I think we've shared that with Gloria, and if we haven't, when we are able to have her on, we'll share that with her. I think it's one of my favorite stories, but that leads into another. Yes. So after that, we, this is several years later. In fact, this was just this year. We brought Wes Hampton to DC, and his family came, and this was last December. And they were actually going over to the Grand Cayman. He was singing over there, but they were stopping in DC on their way. And so he brought all the boys, all 4 of them, Andrea, his wife, and we were just going to give them a full-blown tour of DC while they were there. And we love them. I mean, we have so much fun with them. We travel with Wes, obviously with the vocal band when we do any dates with them. But this was just fun to have some downtime and just to get to spend quality time with them. And they wanted to go see all these. Of course, everybody wants to go see the staples, which is like the monuments, the Supreme Court, the Capitol building, the Library of Congress. And so when we got into the Library of Congress, most people, you taught me this, don't know this, but they can actually get their reader's card at the Library of Congress. They can stand in line, they go get their reader's card, and then they can go check out a book in the Library of Congress. You can't take it home. You have to keep it there in the library, but you can go check out a book and read it in the library and put it back. You can't do that otherwise. And in fact, you can't even walk into the room of the Library of Congress unless you have the reading room, unless you have your reader's card. Yeah. And so we took them to go get their reader's cards. All the boys thought that would just be awesome. And so we did all that. And as we're walking in, I remember hearing one of the workers there say, we have 2 copies of every book that's ever been published. And that intrigued me a little bit, because the person inside of me that's like very competitive, I'm like, well, let's test this theory out. So I thought about Gloria's book, and I thought, well, let's see if they have something beautiful in here, Gloria's book. And so they have little computers all around the reading room that you can search, different titles, and they'll tell you where they're located. So I searched for Gloria Gaither, Something Beautiful, and it came up, but it wasn't in the reading room. We found out that the Library of Congress has an underground area that you can go to because they're actually sectioned off by different genres and different Yeah, well, they have a music.
Yeah,
they
like
call it the
music,
reading room,
TV,
art.
movies, all of that. They have so many different artifacts.
Yep.
And so that took us on another little adventure that we had never done. And we were like, come on, Wes, let's do
Mind
this.
you, as well, the Library of Congress built a facility outside of DC in Northern Virginia that all it is for online or digital recordings.
Right.
Any type of recordings from way back when all the way to now. Everything that's ever been published online as a recording, CDs, whatever, has a copy there as well.
Yeah.
So we keep great detail as a country, our government does, of everything that's put out.
Everything.
So
we go down this tunnel and it felt like we walked for an hour and a half. We didn't. I think we walked for maybe 15 minutes. But then all of a sudden, you're in this area that you just didn't know existed. And there was their musical room for any kind of books that dealt with music, artifacts that dealt with music. And so we walk in and they gave us this card because they said, this is what you're going to give them. And they'll take this card, they'll go get the book for you. And so we walked in and everybody there was so happy to see us because I don't think they ever get visitors because I didn't know about it. And if you didn't know about it, then I know most people don't know about it because you know almost everything there is to know about Washington,
I wouldn't go
D.C.
that far, but thank you.
You do. And as many years as you've been there, I mean, it shocked me that you had never heard of this. It didn't shock me that I hadn't because I'm still new to it. But they lit up. They were so excited. There's people in this room. And so we walk in and we give her the card and this girl goes back to this other room that's like this door closed off. And this man comes out and he said, I have the book that you came looking for. And they handed us Gloria's book. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is it. They actually have Gloria Gaither's book in the Library of Congress. How cool is it to say that your book is in the Library of Congress? And that further took us on this little conversation with this gentleman and this lady who worked in that room. And he took out this record of Elvis Presley that was one of the original records that was like one of the first ones ever made that Elvis made and had some stuff signed by Elvis.
He had
and
like a xylophone or something.
he had a xylophone,
Yeah.
like
crazy.
old xylophone too. And he played it for us.
And he played this it was a live recording of a comedian who had this bit. And he laughed. He laughed a song.
He laughed through the whole song.
And it sounded...
No, it wasn't the George Yance laughing song, but it was a lot like that.
But he told us before he played it, he said, y'all will be so shocked. It sounds just like you were in the room. He said, because this was recorded on a machine like this.
Right.
Live in the room.
I have the recording of it somewhere. I need to find it.
It was beautiful to hear. I mean, it made us feel like we had been transported back in time. And what a cool thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I just thought it was really neat that, I mean, we went on this journey to look for Gloria's book. But in the end of that, after talking to this gentleman and this lady, they talked about how we had brightened their day and how it was just amazing to see people down there. And he was able, I think, they have a love for music, obviously. And I wouldn't necessarily say they have a love for Christian music, but they have a love for all types of music. And for him, it was just amazing to be able to do his job and explain, what everything was and all these artifacts. It was like he came to life.
It's because his job is to preserve, right?
Right.
I mean, obviously he wants people to come in, but his job as a whole is to preserve everything about music that comes to the Library of Congress.
Yeah, and I think too, because they do work in almost, I don't want to say it's a dungeon, but it is in a underground. They don't see many people, and it has to be a little bit depressing, because what he wants to do is his job, which is to preserve music and teach people about what each little artifact is and how it came to be. And I don't think that gets to happen much. And so it was amazing because we wanted to film us singing something beautiful, all three of us together, you, me, and Wes. And we went out there, we held the book, and we sang something beautiful. And we just did the chorus.
Yep.
And when we got done, you know, he even said, I'm not a Christian. I'm not a believer. He said, but that really touched me. That really, really touched me. But the young lady who was sitting next to him said, I haven't been to church since COVID. And she said, I haven't stepped foot in my church in a very long time since COVID. Of course, this is 2022. And so, you know, that's 2 years she hasn't stepped foot in her church. And she said, I was very involved and I just loved it. And she said, I miss all the people that I went to church with, but I just haven't gone back since. She said, I kind of, you know, at first it was because it shut down and then it became a routine. And I think that was for a lot of people. A lot of people are still not back in church since COVID.
Yeah.
And she said, but I feel like because you guys came in, the Lord is speaking to me that I need to go back to church. And so we didn't know why we were really coming there. And I think that is just to show you how God works in so many vastly different ways. When we had one mission, which was really just to find Gloria's book, he had a whole nother mission. He was using what we wanted to really help out these other people in this office.
Well, and I think even to take it a step further than that, you know, that whole week, the few days that they were there was supposed to be initially a concert, end of the year concert we were doing with Museum of the Bible. And for some different reasons, we had to postpone it. The museum made the call. And I was really frustrated. You remember, I was very, very agitated by that. But looking back now, I can't even begin to imagine what God was doing. And I think that entire trip, because we told Wes and them and the sound, we said, guys, you know, your family was supposed to come. Karen Peck, they were making a special trip. So I said, just, you know,
everybody stay home. There's no point.
There's no point coming unless you know, you were flying, because some of them were driving a bus. I said, if you're driving the bus, just stay home.
And the sound was already in New York, so they could just drive. For those that don't know, it's only a 3-hour drive.
Yeah, it's not far.
It's not far.
But, you know, Wes and his family were flying through D.C. to get to the Cayman Islands.
So it worked out. They came anyways, and they just made a kind of like a tourism trip out of it.
We'll show you a good time. We'll have a great experience. We took them to the Museum of the Bible, and they got to meet some folks for future events that we had. But I think everything about that, even down to the canceling of a concert, was we would not have done that.
No.
We would not have had the time to go to the Library of Congress to find Gloria's book, and we would not have met these people, which, mind you, we have gone back to see on many occasions now since then. About every time I'm in D.C., if I have a free hour over lunch, I'll walk over there, stop in, because Rachmaninoff, if you're a classical...
I was about to say, you have to tell them whose desk is there.
Rachmaninoff's personal desk is sitting down there, just kind of hanging out, you know.
It's crazy. It's just sitting there.
One of Kenny G's saxophones is there. It's just some really amazing pieces of history.
And they will take out anything that you really want to look at. They have these glass cabinets. And if you want to see something, he'll take it out, and he wears gloves to take it out and show you. He'll teach you all about the artifact and where it came from, how old it is. And
we had that thing he showed us. He pulled out some pictures, news articles of Frank Sinatra when he was just the very first group he sang with before he was a solo artist. I mean, original newspaper clippings from way back. And it was just neat. I mean, he took such care and interest in the boys.
You almost feel like some of this stuff should be in a Smithsonian. But it's how do they organize that? How do you figure out what goes to a Smithsonian and then what goes to... Because I would have never categorized some of this stuff to Library of Congress. Like the article for, Frank Sinatra, how does that fit into Library of Congress? But I guess they have their own certain way. It's just, DC is full of history. Everybody knows that, but it's more than what you realize, and even more than we realized.
No, I agree. It was an amazing opportunity for us to show the love of Jesus Christ, and it had nothing to do with a member of Congress. It had nothing to do with anything other than just being in the right place at the right time, and God orchestrated all of that to put us there at that moment. And then obviously, now that we know that this place exists down there, we go a lot.
And to build relationships with these people. And hopefully...
Beautiful.
yeah, and hopefully, maybe with the gentleman, we'll get the chance to really share what the Lord has done in our lives and share Jesus with him. Most of the time he's working, but it's just been an amazing journey, and to watch how something that was meant to be so fun and an adventure and something we were really just doing to film and show Gloria turned out to be something so much more than that. It was just way more than what we really knew was going on.
Well, at some point, when we're able to have her on, we'll let her maybe share some more of that story, because there's more to the story there.
Yeah.
But I've been so blown away by the power of music, the transcending power of music and prayer. Obviously, we've had that conversation. We talked with Dale recently about, what prayer means in that environment. But for the both of us who grew up as musicians, as singers, to be able to use the giftings that God has given us in that environment as well. I mean, I remember when I left the music world, I literally remember having this thought, I'll never sing again. I'm done with that. I'm cool with it. No problem. This is what God's called me to do. And I've learned that God never gives us gifts that he doesn't intend on us using for his glory.
Right.
And so all through these years of being in DC, whether it's singing on the balcony of a senator's office, singing in the rotunda, as we both have done,
singing in the Library of Congress in some random office building.
Yep. Or the Congressional Prayer Chapel, members' offices, whatever. We have had such an opportunity to use. The Senate Chaplain's office was one of the coolest places, I think, the sound, to sing overlooking the National Mall from JFK's old office. What a cool spot. But what a privilege to get to use the talents that God has given us in a way that we never dreamed possible. And the way I've looked at it is, you and I both, in different ways and different times, have sung in some of the coolest, biggest venues, around the world. You've sung in coliseums and arenas. But to me, looking back over these years, some of the most meaningful opportunities for us to sing have been in the halls of power. And God has used that to transcend beyond the politics of the day. And what a privilege it is. And the fact that we get to do it together, even more so, is what is such a joyful experience for me. And I love that. And this is one of my favorite stories, just recent. It starts way back and kind of comes up to just in the last 8 months.
Yeah.
And so really, really special time that we got to share. And we have had many more artists that have come through, and we'll have many more artists that come through to visit with us. And if you want to come through and visit with us, this has been a shorter episode this week, just a few minutes shorter. I always say it's really long or really short. It's only about 3 or 4 minutes shorter than normal. But if you want to come and hang out with us in DC, we have a trip in January called History and Hymns. We have trips throughout the year. You can come and experience some of that with us, but you also can follow this podcast if you would like. We would love to have you follow it. Leave us a review.
Yes, please. That helps us so much.
Subscribe, or whatever they call that term. I think it's subscribe.
It is,
and follow.
Subscribe and follow, whichever one you see in front of you right now. But we're on all the platforms for podcasts now. And so wherever you're listening, whether it's a follow or subscribe, please do so. And then if you want to learn more about Hope to the Hill, maybe this is your first episode to listen to, you can go to hopetothehill.com.
Yeah.
And don't forget, we have outreaches coming up. If you want to help with that, you can always definitely give. You can donate to that to help with outreach. That goes towards anything that we are giving out to members of Congress and helping these pastors that are coming on this trip with us. That's coming up in just about a week and a half.
Yeah.
Can you believe that?
Oh, no.
We're already at the next outreach. We just finished the last outreach.
But, even more than that, all of our team, and I love to share this with people, each of our team raised their own support. We've raised our own support to do what we do.
Yeah.
So even though we're all under the banner of this ministry, each of our team raises their support. So if you want to support us or any of our team monthly, you can do that. And it helps actually keep this podcast going too.
It does.
By supporting us. And this is a podcast that is part of our ministry in DC. And we hope that you guys have been blessed by it and will continue to be blessed by it, because it's a lot of fun for us to just reminisce on these stories of what God has done over the last few years. And you know what? Even beyond that, pray for the justice and all the justices that we've come into contact with over the years. Pray that God would do something in their hearts. If he has not, for the members, for that gentleman in the Library of Congress, for that lady,
yeah.
I hope that maybe y'all will go home or wherever you are, stop and pray for those folks, that God would just really meet them where they are. And that's really what it's all about.
Yeah.
We want them to have an encounter with Jesus Christ. And that's why we do what we do. So
Absolutely.
It's a joy. Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Amber.
Thank you.
Love
We'll
you.
see you guys next week.
Thanks. See y'all soon.